Success is usually treated as an endpoint, a moment where something is completed, where effort pays off, where the difficult part is over. It creates the sense that once something has been achieved, the direction that led there will continue on its own. That assumption does not always hold, because success does not preserve the conditions that created it. It changes them. It removes pressure. It removes urgency. The story of Theseus is not just about defeating the Minotaur. It is about what happens after that moment, when the structure that guided him begins to disappear and the consequences of that change begin to take shape. Theseus does not begin his journey as someone who has already won. He enters it with a clear objective and an understanding that what he is about to face cannot be across without preparation. The labyrinth is not simply a physical challenge. It is a system designed to confuse, to trap, and to remove any sense of direction. Within that system, strength alone is not enough. Without a way to navigate, without a method to maintain orientation, even the most capable person would fail. That is what makes Ariadne's thread significant. It is not just a tool, it is structure. It is the thing that allows Theseus to move forward without losing his way. Inside the labyrinth, Theseus is focused. Every movement matters. Every decision has a consequence that cannot be ignored. The presence of the Minotaur reinforces that pressure. This is not a situation where mistakes can be corrected easily. The environment demands attention, discipline, and awareness. And within that environment, Theseus performs exactly as he needs to. He uses the thread, he maintains direction, and he ultimately defeats the Minotaur. In that moment, everything works. The preparation holds. The structure does what it was meant to do, and the result is success. But that success changes the situation immediately. The pressure that existed inside the labyrinth no longer exists once he leaves it. The need for constant awareness fades, and the structure that guided him becomes less relevant, and a change begins. The focus that was necessary no longer required in the same way. The discipline that kept him alive is no longer being reinforced by immediate consequences. Without those pressures, it becomes easier to move forward without the same level of attention. The defeat of the Minotaur is not the end of the narrative. It is the point where a different challenge begins. Once external pressure is removed, the responsibility to maintain structure shifts inward. It is no longer enforced by the environment and depends entirely on us as individuals. Theseus leaves the labyrinth, but he does not leave with the same awareness he had inside it. Theseus abandons Ariadne, the same person who made his success possible, a decision that is not framed as a calculated move within a system that demands it. Instead, taking place outside of that system, in a space where the urgency that once guided him no longer exists. That is what makes it significant. It shows how quickly the connection between success and the factors that created it can be lost once the immediate need for those factors disappears. The pattern continues. Theseus forgets to change the sails on his ship, a detail that carries consequences beyond the moment it is overlooked. This is not a complex challenge. It is not something that requires strength or strategy. It is something simple, something that depends on attention and follow-through. And yet, it is missed. That missed detail leads directly to his father's death, a result that is not connected to a lack of ability, but to a lack of awareness after success has already been achieved. What connects these moments is not failure in the traditional sense. Theseus has already succeeded in the most difficult part of his journey. It is the loss of the structure that made that success possible. Inside the labyrinth, every action was guided by necessity. Outside of it, that necessity disappears, and without it, the responsibility to maintain that same level of focus becomes something that must be chosen rather than enforced. This is where the story reflects something that extends beyond mythology. Success often removes the conditions that created it. The pressure that forced discipline disappears. The urgency that required attention fades. And without those factors, it becomes easier to operate at a lower level of awareness. This happens gradually, as the environment changes and the need for certain behaviors becomes less obvious, but the consequences remain. They simply take longer to appear. People experience this in different ways. After achieving something significant, there is often a period where maintaining the same level of effort feels unnecessary. The structure that once guided actions is no longer reinforced by immediate consequences, and without that reinforcement, it becomes easier to drift. Not because the ability is gone, but because the conditions that required that ability are no longer present in the same way. Over time, that drift can lead to outcomes that feel disconnected from the success that came before them, even though they are directly related. Theseus represents that transition, not from failure to success, but from success into something less stable. His ability does not change only his environment. That change removes the external structure that once kept everything aligned. What remains is the need to maintain that structure internally, without the same level of pressure forcing it into place. And that is where the breakdown occurs, not because of a lack of capability, but because of a change in conditions that is not fully recognized. The story does not suggest that success leads to failure automatically. It shows that success creates a different environment, one where the factors that once ensured performance are no longer guaranteed. Within that environment, the responsibility to maintain those factors becomes more difficult because it is no longer enforced externally. It must be sustained intentionally, without the same immediate consequences reinforcing it. This is what gives the story its impact. It shifts the focus away from the moment of victory and toward what happens afterward. It shows that the most visible part of success is not always the most important. The conditions that lead to it matter more than the moment itself, and once those conditions change, the outcome can change as well, even if the initial success was complete. The question that remains is not whether someone can succeed. It is whether they can maintain the structure that made that success possible once the environment no longer requires it. Because without that structure, the direction that led to success does not continue on its own. It begins to shift, gradually at first, until the results no longer match what came before. Theseus defeats the Minotaur. That part of the story is clear. But what follows shows something that is less obvious and more difficult to recognize. It shows how quickly the connection between success and discipline can weaken once the immediate need for that discipline disappears. And once that connection weakens, the outcome is no longer determined by what was achieved before, but by what is maintained after. That is where the story leaves its impact. Not in the moment of victory, but in the realization that what comes after success requires the same level of attention as what came before it. Because without that attention, success does not carry forward. It becomes something that existed in a moment, while everything that follows begins to move in a different direction.